Hello and welcome to the Beef Age, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode, Noel Meehan, Manager of the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme, joins me to discuss water quality. I first asked Noel, what is the ASSAP programme?
The ASSAP programme is a new initiative designed to improve water quality in Ireland, and it's a broad collaboration across all the agricultural industry. So you have involved in it Teagasc, who provide 20 advisors. You have the dairy co-ops that are providing 10 advisors, and you have funding provided by dairy co-ops by the two departments, Department of Agriculture and the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government as well. And you also have support from the farming organisations, the IFAs, ICMSAs, they're all supporting the programme. And we work very closely with our colleagues in LawPro, the Local Authorities Waters Programme. So they provide the science for the advisors to go out and visit farms in the ASSAP. So what is the ASSAP? It's a free, confidential service for farmers in priority areas for action. So these are catchments, 190 of them across the country, where the ASSAP advisors work in. So the idea is that the advisors are available to provide an advisory service. It's voluntary, it's confidential to farmers, and we look at the various issues that are on the farms and come up with a plan for each farm, an individual plan for each farm designed to improve water quality. It was I suppose, where did the ASSAP come from? The first National River Basin Management Plan didn't maybe achieve what it had hoped to achieve, so there was a bit of soul searching, a bit of looking at what they had done in the first River Basin Management Plan, and they decided to maybe flip the whole thing over and go from a regulatory approach to a more collaborative, more engagement focused approach. So less of the big stick and a little bit more of the carrot, and where you had much more engagement with farmers at their level, where we're talking to them about the problems that are in the local stream, coming up with solutions in conjunction with the farmers with a view to trying to improve water quality. So it is really a very broad industry-wide collaboration, and we're maybe 2 years into it now at this stage, and so far so good from the point of view of farmer buy-in and the collaboration that's we're working on.
It is a real collaborative approach. This is the first such approach adopted in Ireland. Where are we nationally when it comes to water quality?
So nationally, with water quality, we're unfortunately had a little dip in water quality in the last number of years. It is not as good as it was from the point of view that we are under requirement from the Water Framework Directive, which is an EU directive, to have all our waters at good status by 2027. So all what I mean by waters, I mean rivers, streams, lakes, estuaries, coastal waters, groundwater. They all need to be at good status. And I suppose to put that into context, beef farmers out there would obviously be familiar with the 4 and 5 star heifer. So good status means 4 or 5 star water quality. And unfortunately, in the last number of years, it has slipped slightly. So we have a lot of work to do to try and reach that target for 2027.
And what are the issues that you're seeing with regard to local streams and catchments that you've mentioned?
So the initial science that's coming back to us from LawPro is indicating that there's diffuse loss of nutrients and sediment are the main issues with regards to water quality in the rivers that are out there. So what I mean by diffuse losses of nutrients, so that's diffuse phosphorus and nitrogen losses. So that's losses of nutrients at a field scale level or a farm scale level, and sediment as well from farm scale level. I suppose traditionally people would have thought of point sources, so that's your typical scenario where you have a direct discharge of say, for example, dirty water or soil water into a drain or into a stream, but via a pipe. So that's a direct discharge. So what we're finding is that they aren't as big an issue as what maybe previously would have been expected. Roughly 75% of the pressures that we find on the water quality out there are from diffuse phosphorus, nitrogen and sediment losses.
And what's causing this diffuse phosphorus loss?
So I suppose the big thing that we had to do when we started the program was to help farmers understand how this diffuse phosphorus and nitrogen, we'll probably come to that in a few minutes, but diffuse phosphorus and sediment was getting into streams and rivers and causing a problem, because this is typically a problem in the more heavier soils, the less free draining soils that are out there. So you're looking at the land across the drumline belt of north, Meath and Cavan, Monaghan, over Leitrim, Roscommon, Mayo, Galway. Heavier soils in maybe in the southwest around Limerick and I suppose every county has a bit of heavy land. So what happens is you have when you have heavy rainfall, those soils get saturated very quickly. And once those soils get saturated very quickly, the water starts to move across the surface. So you have overland flow of water. And particularly if you have any bit of a slope at all, you're going to have overland flow of water. And what that does is it brings with it the available phosphorus that's there, that may be put out by slurry or in chemical form, that hasn't been used by a plant, and that can get washed away in this overland flow of water. And the sediment as well. So sediment really is soil particles that are loose on the surface of the soil, and they get washed away overland flow as well. And phosphorus binds very tightly to soil particles. So what you have is phosphorus bound to the sediment particles that end up in the stream, and they are released over a period of time in the stream as well. So you have the plant available phosphorus that gets washed away when you have heavy rainfall, and you have the sediment. So you have two kind of sources of phosphorus there. So that's a very key point to for farmers to understand what kind of land they have. Most farmers know that what fields are free draining, what fields are that bit heavier, and that those heavier fields you need to treat those a little bit differently at certain times of the year to ensure that if there is heavy rainfall events, that the slurry that you might have put out or the chemical fertilizer that you might have put out doesn't end up in the river or the stream.
You mentioned nitrogen loss. What can farmers do on farm to reduce this loss?
So I suppose nitrogen is a little bit different to phosphorus. We just spoke about phosphorus. So nitrogen is an issue in free draining sandier soils that you would get maybe in the southeast and south of the country. So nitrogen behaves differently to phosphorus. As I said, phosphorus binds tightly to the soil particles, whereas nitrogen doesn't bind tightly to soil particles. So if you apply your chemical fertilizer on your soil, and the growing plant, the grass or the tillage crop doesn't use that nitrogen for growing purposes, well, then that nitrogen is left there in the soil, and that nitrogen can be leached away in times of heavy rainfall. So what happens is that if it's not used by the plant, it's lying there in the soil, doing nothing, I suppose, and the rainfall falls down. It leaches it through the soil, through the free draining soil, into the groundwater, and eventually ends up in the rivers and the streams. Now, that is a particular problem, more so in the estuaries and the coastal areas of the country. The nitrogen levels generally aren't a major problem in the rivers and the lakes. It's more when you get to the estuaries and the coastal areas that you see a problem. And also, there's a potential for some problems with nitrogen in groundwater. So what can farmers do, I suppose, to mitigate or to alleviate nitrogen losses? It's very important that when you're applying your nitrogen fertilizer, be it in a bag format or via slurry or organic manure, that you do it in appropriate conditions. So the shorter periods of the year are key periods of the year for applying nitrogen, because that's when your growth rates are probably at their lowest, and where the rainfall generally is at its highest. So if you have low growth rate and heavy rainfall, and you apply excess nitrogen in the shorter periods of the year, so I'm talking about February, March, April, late August, September, that kind of period, well, then you're going to have a good chance that nitrogen is going to be leached from your soil. So the timing of it, of the applications, is very important, and the rate that you apply. So you need to, not over apply. You need to apply in accordance with soil temperature and soil moisture. in the soils, and that should help improve your nitrogen use efficiencies.
And from the recent experience of ASSAP advisors, what are the key areas that advisors are focusing on with farmers, and how has farmer engagement been with the programme?
Well, thankfully, farmer engagement has been quite positive. Currently about 96% of farmers that we've contacted have agreed for an ASSAP advisor to come out and visit the farm and go through the whole process with them. And that's great reflection on farmers, because it shows that farmers are willing to take on board the environmental issues, the water quality issues that are out there. And it's important to approach farmers and include farmers in the solutions to these problems. That's the whole point of the ASSAP, that you engage with farmers, that you talk to them about the problems that are there. You ask them for their thoughts and their solutions to the problems that are out there. And it's working really well in that the farmers are happy with the service that we provided, and are willing to take on the mitigation actions that are out there. So from that point of view, it's working really well. So I suppose, what are the issues that we're finding when we go out on farms? There are kind of three areas that we look at. We obviously look at the farmyard. I suppose a lot of the issues and on farmers that we find may not be impacting directly on water quality, as in there's no connection from a farmyard to a water body, a stream or a drain. But they may not be. They may need some tidying up from a cost compliance point of view. So we give advice to farmers on those kind of things. I suppose the second area that we look at is the land management. So what activities is the farmer carrying out on his farmland that may be impacting on the water quality in the area? So this goes back to my previous thing about diffuse phosphorus, sediment, and nitrogen losses. So what are the activities going on there that have an impact? So we'll be looking for areas of the farm that have direct connectivity to water quality. And what I mean by that is that there's a drainage system nearby, or that there's critical source areas on the farm. So critical source areas, every farmer knows what they are. They might know what a critical source area, but they know the areas of the farm where the water funnels down to the low part of the farm. That's kind of always the last place to dry up. Those areas have high connectivity generally to drains and water courses. And those areas need to be treated differently by farmers at certain periods of time during the year, maybe the full year round, but certainly in the shorter periods of the year, or where there's high risk of runoff from those areas. So we're identifying those for farmers and coming up with solutions as to how and what they could do to maybe mitigate or prevent the losses of nutrients or sediment to the waters. And then the final thing that we go through with farmers is obviously nutrient use and nutrient management. So we look to try and improve their nutrient use efficiency. Obviously, where farmers have NMPs already available to them, nutrient management plans already available to them, we would maybe sit down and have a look at that and try and have a quick run over with them to make sure that they're applying the appropriate fertilizer in the appropriate places, and that they know their nitrogen and their phosphorus limits as well for the farm. So between all that, we provide a very good comprehensive service to farmers on those issues, and it's generally very well received by the farmers. They appreciate the time that we put in with them, looking through those things.
Yeah, farmers are keen to keep local streams in good quality. What do you see as the challenge in relation to water quality going forward?
Well, I suppose that the big challenge that we have at the minute is obviously that we need to stop the downward trend in water quality. So, as I mentioned earlier, water quality is on a downward trend. We need to stop that and get it returning back in a positive way. So, there's lots of scope there for doing that with farmers, and I think that the vast majority of farmers, as you said, want to have good water in their streams. But I suppose where we need to come into as an advisory service, as the ASSAP and even a broader Teagasc and nationwide advisory service, is that we need to help farmers understand how the practices that they're traditionally have been doing on the farm are actually impacting negatively on water quality. So, farmers, and to be fair, probably on occasions don't realize that certain activities are having an impact. So it's up to the advisory service to highlight the problems that are out there, and to that are on the farms, and give them solutions and differences, different practices that they can carry out that won't impact negatively on their ability to farm, but just at key points of the year, times of the year, will lessen the chance or lessen the risk of nutrients and sediment being lost to the water. So I think that's the main thing, that we raise awareness and we get a more of an understanding about these issues out there. We're working in 190 priority areas for action, so that's only a very small percentage of the whole country. There's lots of farmers out there that could benefit from a little bit more of a focus on water quality issues out there. So that's something that the wider advisory body needs to try and get a handle on as well.
Yes, most often it's a combination approach really, rather than a one size fits all, as you've highlighted, Noel. Finally, you've mentioned a lot of things that farmers can do, and as we approach the autumn period, what would you recommend the 3 changes that a farmer could implement on their farm that could help water quality in their area?
Yeah, so I suppose when we go to a farm, it's every farmer is different. So as you quite rightly put it, one size does not fit all. What we have to focus on is putting the right measure in the right place at the right time. So for example, if you have a critical source area, an area that has high connectivity to a water course, what you do in that land at periods of the year can have an impact on water quality. So, for example, to give a bad example, but to give an example is if you have an area that typically floods in the winter due to flooding, well then obviously putting out a ring feeder there or feeding cattle in that spot would be not a very good practice to do. But there may be other sites on the farm that are perfectly fine for that to happen, in accordance with all the regulations that are currently there with regards to overwintering. But things like that. So those are the kind of things that we'll be trying to highlight to farmers to make them aware of the issues that are on the farm, and help them to come up with different ways of doing their farming, so they can still make a living and still be profitable. I suppose if I was to give a couple of things there, I would focus on use of nutrients in the shorter periods of the year. So that's your late January, February, March, April kind of period of time, and then your September, October. So those are your August, September, and you can't put out chemical fertilizer in October, obviously. But them are the key periods of the time when you have heavy rainfall and your growth rates are not as high as they would be during the summer, and there's the greatest risk of nutrient loss and at those times of the year. So you need to be really aware of the weather forecast. When there's heavy rain forecast, you need to be very aware of the soil moisture content of the field. So if the fields are waterlogged or very close to being waterlogged, and you put out slurry and you get heavy rainfall, well, what's going to happen. The soil's going to get saturated. You're going to have that overland flow of water. It's going to bring with it the slurry that went out, or the chemical fertilizer that went out. That's going to get washed away. So soil moisture deficit, temperature, timing, very, very important that you're aware of the weather forecast in the shorter period of the year. The other thing I would advise farmers to do is if you have a nutrient management plan, that you get more familiar with it. That you take heed of what the fertilizer limits are on that. That you have your allowance for phosphorus, you have your allowance for nitrogen. The derogation farmers have a greater allowance for nitrogen, but that there is still a limit to what the derogation farmers can apply as well, and that needs to be adhered to. So that'll be the second thing that I would recommend for farmers to do. And the third thing I would recommend is, maybe contact your local advisor and see, would they be able to come out and have a look at your farm from a water quality point of view? Can they identify certain areas of the farm, certain practices that you're doing that are having an impact on water quality, and come up with a solution, a set of solutions for you that will hopefully reduce those losses. You're looking at identifying those critical source areas, putting in your buffer strips, your riparian margins in certain points of the farm, maybe fencing off a few water courses, maybe putting in a couple of troughs, things like that that will help reduce the loss of the phosphorus sediment to waters and ultimately improve water quality. I mean, we all need to double down on this and work really hard, because as farmers are more aware are very aware, the biodiversity, the greenhouse gases, the water quality issues, that the environment issues are here, and it's up to us as an industry to try and come up with better ways of doing our work, so that we can tackle all three at the one time, and see, you know, the press for farmers in a positive light, that we're doing what we can to put our shoulder to the wheel to improve the environment conditions of our countryside. And I think that's well within everybody's capability to do so.
Most definitely, I think water quality, biodiversity and habitats are definitely integrated to ensuring the sustainability of farming systems going by. And by checking the latest and most up-to-date nutrient management plan for your farm, being more aware of where you're applying slurry and chemical fertiliser, and contacting your local advisor are some great tips to improving water quality nationally. Thanks very much, Noel, for joining me on the show.
You're very welcome, Catherine. No problem.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Noel for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.